So good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I just wanted to share a few brief housekeeping announcements. First, we would like to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance of tonight's town hall. We hope to address many of your vaccine questions over the next hour with our panelists. If you have additional questions or need clarification, you can use the Q&A function in Zoom. And as a reminder, this is a public forum, so anything you type will be visible to others. Tonight's town hall is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook. Please feel free to share the link so that others can tune in, and we will paste the Facebook Live link to this event in the chat momentarily. And finally, a recording of tonight's event will be made available on the Montgomery County YouTube page, and we will also send that link out to everyone who registered tonight once the video is uploaded. And now I will turn it over to George Che to start us off.
Good evening. My name is George Che, Chair of Asian American Coalition for Health. We have been waiting for the approval of the vaccine for 5 to 11 years old children for a long time. Now we have it, and so we need to vaccinate them. As the president and CEO of Jason Center with the Medical Center operation, I am hearing more infection cases for young people. And I would like to share just a couple quick data for your consideration. CDC data shows that for each COVID reported case, there are about 2.5 times more infections for children than the general population. Another thing we know is over 20% of the hospitalized cases are children, young people. And the last data I would like to share is that since January 2020, we have had about 95 COVID death cases for 5 to 11 years old children. I know we are numbed by this high number associated with the COVID, but these are the 95 children who could have lived for the next 90 to 100 years. And we should really seriously think about vaccinating our children. I hope that this town hall is a good learning opportunity for you. We have Dr. Val joining us on the road that join us and her conflicts and welcome this community. So Dr. Val Akush.
Thank you, George, and good evening, everybody. It is so wonderful to be here with you tonight. And I am so happy that we are finally able to talk with you about the facts and the science and the data behind vaccines for children between the ages of 5 and 11. You know, we're at just such a opportune place as we combat this pandemic. We have been using the data and the science now for over 1.5 years to guide all of our decision-making here in Montgomery County, and we've made tremendous progress. We have about 85% of the residents of Montgomery County who are 12 years of age and older, either fully vaccinated, and that's the vast majority, or having had received at least 1 shot of a 2-dose vaccine. So that is fantastic progress. But despite this, we are still seeing cases, and many of those cases are in folks that are not vaccinated. The vast majority are in people that are not vaccinated. And that includes children under 12 who are not eligible to be vaccinated. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I know that you have many, many questions, and I am so grateful that you are joining us tonight, where you will hear accurate, factual, science-based information. And we urge you to share this information with your friends and family. You'll receive a link to the recording of this presentation tonight, and we urge you to share that as well. There is so much bad information out there that really remains our biggest challenge. So you can help be a part of our community that shares the factual information with those that need it. So thanks again for joining us. And I'm going to turn over to your expert moderator for this evening, Dr. Wang. Dr. Wang is the Chief Medical Officer for our Department of Public Safety at the county, and is also our Regional Emergency Management System Director and an ER doc, still practicing ER doc. Dr. Wang.
Thanks so much, Dr. Akush, and thanks everybody for coming here tonight. So it is, again, very nice to be here with all of you as a Taiwanese American, as a parent, and as a Montgomery County resident. I am so happy that we are able to sponsor this type of event and get accurate information out there. And so without further ado, I'd like to just take a moment to have our panelists introduce themselves. So in no particular order, Dr. Jeyaraj.
Yeah, I'm Francis Jeyaraj. I'm a pediatrician in Lansdale, Montgomery County. I'm also on the Board of Health of Montgomery County. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks so much, Dr. Jeyaraj. And Dr. He?
Hi, everyone. My name is Shan He. Now I'm working at biotech and, working on the immune oncology. And previously I work at Johnson & Johnson. So today I'm here to talk to you as a parent of I have 2 boys who are eligible now for the vaccine. What I'm talking about is just to represent my own opinion and will not represent my previous and current employer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. He. And Dr. Benjamin?
Hi, I'm Alex Benjamin. I'm an infectious disease doctor by training, and now I'm the hospital epidemiologist for Lehigh Valley Health Network. I spent a lot of my training time actually in Montgomery County. I lived in North Wales. I lived in Jenkintown. I worked at one of the local hospitals, and I just recently moved up to the Lehigh Valley and excited to share information and answer questions about this vaccine, this pandemic. And hopefully you can share that also with your family and friends.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Benjamin. So a very distinguished panel with us tonight. So without further ado, let's get to the questions that have been submitted. So first question for Dr. Benjamin. So some parents are concerned about the safety of the vaccine and certainly the steps that have been taken to get us to this safe vaccine are relatively complex. So could you take us through some of those steps, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we talk to parents about whether or not they're going to get their child vaccinated, I think the primary concern is, what is the safety of my child? And certainly one of the strategies that we've seen so far is this watch and wait, let someone else's kids get the vaccine first and see what happens. We do have a little more experience, of course, with older children, those ages above the age of 12, and we've seen, excellent effects in terms of safety and efficacy. I think sometimes in the media, we focus on these rare events like myocarditis and things like that, but we sometimes gloss over the actual protective effect of this vaccine. It's all couched in safety. I think first and foremost, when pharmaceuticals are looking to create a vaccine, we of course work with the adult population first. And we look at the safety and efficacy there. And then I think we start to work down in the age groups. And I think the first thing that we think about is, what is the appropriate dose? It clearly can't be in some cases the same as the adult dose. We do know in the phase 1 trials that Pfizer conducted that was really the primary focus. What is the appropriate dose? And if you've been keeping up with the news, you know that the dose for ages 5 through 11 is 10 micrograms, which is a lot lower than the adult dose, which is 30 micrograms. So selecting the appropriate dose is the first step. The next step is to make sure that it provides, the immune stimulus that we are looking for protection. And then, of course, the phase 2 and 3 trials come along to talk about safety and efficacy. I think one of our other panelists is going to talk a little bit about safety and side effects, which were generally fairly mild, nothing unexpected in that data from Pfizer. And I think the last piece in terms of safety is the packaging and the time and dedication that Pfizer, FDA, CDC have all put into making sure that as the drug received its emergency use authorization, that we understood that this is a very different product in a sense that's going out to 5 and 11-year-olds. So different types of packaging, different type of buffer, different type of refrigeration requirements, all for the good, I should say, and making sure that we're using, getting the appropriate doses. And also the planning aspect about the clinical considerations, what happens, making sure that people are getting the right doses for the right age. So I think safety has always been first and foremost in all of these groups' minds, and hopefully that will lead to less adverse events and to focus on the protection that we need for these kids.
That's great, Doctor. Thanks so much for taking us through that. Certainly a lot of safety and a lot of regulation oversight, as well as science involved in the development of those vaccines. That does bring us to the next question for Dr. He. Could you talk about some of the side effects on the vaccine, particularly in the 5 to 11 age group that were discovered during the clinical trials?
Yeah, thank you. So this is all from the reports and then, from the clinical trials and about like the few thousands of kids actually enrolled into the trial and what they have been observed. It seems like the side effects are really similar across like all age groups, like in compared to the adults and the young kid, like the older kids are 12 and to 18 years old. So the main common complaint is about like the pain, right? Pain at the injections site. As early as what Dr. Benjamin mentioned about like the dose actually gave to the 5 to 11 years old actually is much lower. It's 1/3, and also like the needle they used for the age group actually is smaller. So we should expect like the pain should be even like get released like compared to better. And another thing is maybe there's a kids experience the fatigue like what the adult had, especially after the second shot. And then some kids mentioned about headache, and then a few kids mentioned about muscle pain or chills. I think it's almost like this is symptoms we should have seen that for the kids receive the other vaccine the flu seasonal flu shot or the Tdap vaccine. So instead we can handle that most of the side effects at home, and then this is really a self-limiting side effects. So yeah, that's basically what I read from the reports. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. He. So that does actually take us to the next question for Dr. Jeyaraj. So it's been said that every pediatrician really has two patients, the child that you're taking care of and the parents, right? So what advice would you give to parents about monitoring for some of these rare potential adverse effects like myocarditis? Dr. Jeyaraj, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Okay, I'm okay. Thank you, Dr. Wang. I've been practicing pediatrics for over 45 years. And of course, our paramount concern about any vaccine is safety. And over the 45 years, all the vaccines that we have used in pediatrics, I must say, are tremendously researched well and extremely safe. Myocarditis has come up again. Myocarditis means basically inflammation of the heart muscle. And the symptoms would be like a chest pain, shortness of breath, or palpitation, where you might feel like pounding of the heart over the chest. In fact, the possibility of you getting myocarditis is much higher from the natural COVID infection compared to the vaccine. The incidence is extremely low from the vaccine. And also the observation is those, the children who get it, by the way, it's extremely small in number, they almost all recover completely. So as far as the parents are concerned and the safety of the vaccine is concerned, as far as myocarditis is concerned, it is extremely safe.
Those are great points. Thank you very much, Dr. Jeyaraj. So the virus itself, should a child contract it, does have very serious effects. So those relatively minor and rare adverse effects are not as significant as the virus itself. So, Dr. Benjamin, with some of what you've heard about tree nut allergies, is there any information about the safety of this vaccine for those individuals who might have tree nut allergies?
Yeah, fortunately, there have not been any reports of adverse events or allergic responses in patients who have had tree nut allergies. Most of the allergies that we commonly think of with the Pfizer vaccine are, again, just like the adults, related to having severe allergic reactions to components of the vaccine. And if you're not familiar with those are, of course, listed in the fact sheets that come with the Pfizer vaccine. I think if you attend a vaccine clinic or you see your pediatrician, by law, they have to give you an information sheet about the vaccine. So if you're not familiar with the components of the vaccine, you can read about it there. There is certainly a lot of information about the components on the CDC website as well as the FDA website. But so far, we have not heard anything about tree nut allergies.
Great, thanks so much. Definitely very reassuring information there. Dr. Jeyaraj, as a practical question, where could a parent get a vaccine for their child here in Montgomery County?
Thank you again, Dr. Wang. The White House indicated to us not too long ago that they're going to distribute the vaccine to pretty much all across the country, to all the primary care physicians, pediatricians, family practice, of course, the Montgomery County Health Department, pharmacists, and of course, since this event today is sponsored by Jason Foundation, Jason Health Center will also be doing it. In the last weekend, one of the pharmacies actually held mass immunization clinics at some of the local high schools in the area, and they've been very successful. So the thing to do for anybody who wants to get the vaccine is to reach out to their primary care physicians as the first choice, the pharmacist, Jason Foundation, the health department, Children's Hospital. I did talk to them today. They plan on starting the vaccine this Saturday, and all at no cost.
That's great news, Dr. Jeyaraj. So lots of resources out there, lots of opportunities. And we in Montgomery County do strive to maintain an updated listing of all the vaccine locations for both adults and pediatrics on our Montco, PA COVID-19 website. We'll put that in the chat box so that everybody has it available. And so moving on to the next question that's been submitted, Dr. He, do you think that children in that 5 to 11 age range are going to need boosters in 6 months or so, just like adults are getting recommended to do?
I think maybe it's a little bit too early to make a decision about a booster shot. It's right now actually it's time to make a decision for the kids whether we want them to to get the first shot and second not. But like Pfizer and also CDC, I think they are monitor the data, monitor the kids who enrolled in the clinical trial, monitor looking at the data whether they need that the kids will need the booster shot or not. But I think we should really look at the data and then think about what we the adult who receive the fully vaccinated, and then why we consider about the booster shot. So actually it's like 3 reasons, right? The first is like if the person actually did not respond to the first or second vaccine, and then maybe this person should consider to receive the booster shot. And the second is like the immune response actually will peak, and then gradually the response will be go down over time. So, and then the evidence right now really shows that the people who get the booster shot will kind of protect them better, and then make sure the antibody titer will sustain for a longer time and give us better protection, right? The third is like there is a new variants come out, and then the early dose and then will not protect us very well, and then this booster shot will give us like a better chance to kind of fight against the new variants. So I think, you know, for the little kids, we need to, you know, one is monitor the clinical data, and another one and see what happened in the, you know, in the environment, and then whether there is the, you know, the COVID situation is getting better or worse. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dr. He. So lots of monitoring, lots of data that goes into making a science-based decision about a recommendation for boosters. And so, Dr. Benjamin, do you expect that there will be a time frame for other vaccines like Moderna and J&J to be approved for this 5 to 11 age range?
Yeah, we're actually still waiting for the FDA to review Moderna's data on kids ages 12 to 16. So that sort of middle age range group. I know the age ranges are a little different between Pfizer and Moderna. So that was submitted at the end of October, and we have not yet heard of when the FDA will, or the advisory committee, the VRBAC, will be meeting yet on that data. So we're still waiting on that meeting. At the same time, Moderna has submitted or completed its preliminary trials for kids ages 6 to 11 with good results. Now, the only access we have to that data is through their press release. So we can't actually review any of that data. You know, of course, they tout that there's safety and there's efficacy, but it will be nice to be able to have access to that data, ask the appropriate questions. So we're waiting on that. In terms of Janssen, I can't speak to that because I can't actually find any data. I'm assuming that they are in the middle of clinical trials, or at least trying to figure out what the right dose is for Janssen, but nothing's been submitted yet to the FDA. And of course, with Pfizer is already working on, you know, the younger age group, which I think goes down to 6 months.
Gotcha. All right, so lots in progress and many moving pieces to the process to getting other vaccines available. So as a reminder, if you have questions that you'd like to put into the Q&A feature, please feel free to do so to our viewers, and we'll be happy to pass them along and get them answered. So Dr. Jeyaraj, how soon then, as a follow-up, do you think would there be vaccines available for the preschool age group, so those less than 5?
We are waiting for that news. From the press release by Pfizer, and also from what Dr. Fauci says, Pfizer particularly is working very hard on that. They might be the first to release the vaccine. From what we are told, they're working on a vaccine from 2 years to 4 years, and another batch from 6 months to 2 years. So they're like 2 different products they'll be coming out. The expectation is they'll submit their data to FDA and then CDC, followed by the other companies, Moderna and the J&J. The expectation is this is likely to be released sometime like around April of 2022. That's the expectation. Obviously, until that happens, we won't know.
Gotcha. Yep. Thanks very much for that guided speculation about how that process is going. So, Dr. Jeyaraj, Dr. He. So the question was asked, if my child had COVID-19, should they still get a COVID-19 vaccine even though they had the disease already?
I think the CDC actually recommends like the children who had previous like a COVID infection should still get fully vaccinated. So as a parents, basically right now we are really at a point to make a decision that weighing the benefits between actually, you know, vaccination, the side effect, and also really the infection. So a lot of time, like maybe the virus, the kids may develop a symptom of very mild, but scientists and the health officials really, are telling us like that, shot can emphasize the vaccination and could prevent many infection and infections related like symptoms and hospitalizations. And then my kids will get vaccinated this Sunday. So yeah, this is the time as a parent, you make your own decision. So thanks.
Gotcha. Thanks very much, Dr. He. Any other panelists would like to weigh in on that question too?
Yeah, I think at least from the adult literature, we know a recent report came out in the CDC showing that, we always talk about whether natural immunity is enough. Is it enough to protect someone, and how long does that protection last? Versus people who have been maybe never been infected, but have been vaccinated against that, right? And that's always going to be the true test about, the protection. A recent report came out from CDC suggesting that the likelihood of getting infected if you have had previous infection is 5 to 6 times higher than someone who's been vaccinated and has a breakthrough infection. And I think that's pretty telling data. Certainly there, I will say this is one of those areas where we just don't have a lot of study information about how long immunity lasts, both after vaccination and after natural infection. We sort of rely on reports like the Israeli data, where a large chunk of their community and their population had been vaccinated very early on. And then when they encounter a Delta variant, we started to see a lot of breakthrough infections. And I think that was sort of our clue that there is some, time limit to how long your immunity lasts. And maybe that is different, clearly different than how long it lasts after natural infection. There's just no one right rule about this, right? If I were to have been infected with COVID, my natural immunity may last 3 to 6 months, whereas, maybe my neighbor who might have been infected, their immunity might last 6 to 12 months. And we just don't have the tools yet in terms of antibodies and that information to sort of make a determination about, at what level does your immunity wane to the point where you might be at risk of getting reinfected. But the CDC study about, vaccination immunity causing being less risk of reinfection is really very reassuring. And I think speaks to, argues in favor of getting vaccinated after you've been had a previous infection.
Thanks, Dr. Benjamin. That is a great answer and a great study that does show that the protection that's offered by vaccine probably does increase somewhat over that protection that's offered by a natural immunity. And so, not to hit you with 2 questions at once, but as a follow-up, some of the questions that have been asked are about whether it's safe to get the flu shot at the same time that the COVID vaccine is administered.
Yeah, that is a very, very common question now that, boosters have been approved, and now our 5 to 11-year-olds can get vaccinated. So the answer is yes. You can get vaccinated at the same time with COVID and flu vaccines. I will tell you that our experience here at Lehigh Valley is actually, we don't give it at least in our vaccine clinics, we don't give COVID and flu vaccine in the same space, mostly for safety reasons. We don't want someone who's supposed to get flu vaccine accidentally get COVID vaccine and vice versa. But, if there's a situation where you have a patient who needs both, you can give both at the same time. Probably maybe in January, February, there were some early recommendations from the CDC to separate the 2 doses from each other for about 14 days. COVID vaccine from flu, from Tdap, from, shingles vaccine. And then over the summer, they changed that recommendation so that you could get COVID vaccine in a closer interval than 14 days. I do want to remind people that if your child has the opportunity to get both vaccines at the same time, the preferred site is actually the thigh muscle, not the shoulder. And that's really just because you're going to inject 2, volumes of vaccine, and the thigh is a bigger muscle than the shoulder, so it can probably handle, you know, the vaccines better than the shoulder can.
Gotcha. That's a great point. So parents who've been vaccinated likely receive their vaccines in their deltoid or their arm, and as they're talking to their children and kind of prepping them for what a vaccination visit might look like with their pediatricians or at a mass vac site, right? The information they could communicate to help with some of the fears that their child may have, or to communicate that the vaccine might be given in their thigh, because that's actually a site that's more comfortable and would result in like less soreness or less discomfort for the child after the vaccine. That's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. All right, and so in keeping with our goals of bringing you the latest and greatest information, I'm going to ask Dr. Jeyaraj to take an expert opinion here. So with the larger number of children that are potentially being vaccinated, do you think that the mask mandates might be lifted in schools as a result of this?
Very interesting question, Dr. Wang. I think at the end of the day, it depends on the uptake of the vaccine. If a sufficient number of children get the vaccine, yes, that's a possibility. And that again, goes back to the question, in the last year or two, children have been deprived of a lot of their normal activities, sports, getting together, sleeping over, all those things have been denied. So the recommendation or the feeling is get the vaccine, go back to your normal life. So my belief is, I think if sufficient number of children get the vaccine, yes, those mask mandates and all those could be removed. But it's yet to be seen, because based on statistics that we see anywhere from 27% acceptance, parents want to get the vaccine, to I think Dr. Benjamin, I believe, or one of you said, it's about a 40%. So then it depends. One of the observations is, I read of a new term, social vaccine. In other words, vaccines seem to be better accepted when it is done, in a mass scale, such as schools, such as in a clinic, what Jason Foundation is trying to do, where many children, get the vaccine. They look at each other getting vaccine. Parents see other parents bringing their children. So if we follow that kind of, the system, where a lot of children are vaccinated at the same time, yes, Dr. Wang, it's possible that we can all keep the mask off, but not yet.
Gotcha. Thanks, Dr. Jeyaraj. So it has been a long 19 or 20 months now that we've been in this, and the sooner we can get more vaccines out there, the sooner we can return to our normals, which I think is everybody's goal, to get to there in a safe and effective manner. So as a reminder, this is your chance, for those of you watching, to ask some opinions of our expert panelists, right? We have some of the brightest minds here with us today, and they're here and happy to answer your questions. Just put them in the Q&A, the chat box, and we'll pass them along. So there is one question that's come in, and I think this might be most appropriate for you, Dr. Jeyaraj. This is the question was that this individual had their children who received the COVID vaccine today around 5 o'clock, and they all are doing fine. They have a little bit of a sore arm, which is expected. But they wanted to know, what is the window that they should be most concerned about watching for any potential side effects? Is it a day, a couple days? When is that peak window for side effects to develop?
Generally, like Dr. Wang, what you said, most of the side effects are like all the other vaccines. As a pediatrician, when you start, from 6 weeks onwards, you're getting shots. And most parents are pretty comfortable with those. And also, as you know, before kindergarten, suppose the school will require, I believe, about 9 different vaccines that you're supposed to get before you can get into kindergarten. And the side effects are pretty much like what we have addressed earlier: a sore arm, maybe low-grade fever, maybe tired. So generally speaking, in most cases, most side effects are within the first 1 or 2 days. It'll be very unusual for any of those vaccines to cause problems after that.
Gotcha. Thanks so much, Dr. Jeyaraj. So side effects largely similar to those of all the other vaccines that kids have already had to get to be eligible to be in school. And glad to hear that this individual's child was vaccinated and that they are doing well today. So all great news. Another question that's come in is whether or not, and I'll leave this open to the entire panel, so whoever would like to weigh in on this question, but is there any evidence or information about children who get long COVID-19, right? So children who have symptoms of COVID long after their initial infection or some persistent side effects such as, decreased exercise tolerance or shortness of breath and so on.
Yeah, if I can just comment on the long haulers or the long COVID. I think the first thing that we ought to know is we do not know enough of this disease yet. The disease is, let's say, a couple of years old. However, I think there's some observation about some of the symptoms like memory, brain fog, as they call it, tiredness, that is more than what is to be expected. But really, in my way of thinking, we really do not know enough of this disease yet. And I let the other panelists comment if they have any.
Okay. All right. So, there are some of those cases for long COVID or long haulers in the adult population, and still to be seen whether this can occur in the pediatric population. For the entire group. Is there any data or information about potential effects of the COVID-19 vaccine on the onset of puberty in children or even future fertility?
Again, if I can comment on that, the answer is no. There is no evidence that COVID vaccine is going to affect fertility. And I believe that over the 45 years of pediatric practice that I've been, and over the years, many different vaccines came around during my time of pediatric practice, from hepatitis B to measles, to the recent vaccines or meningitis vaccines, and there were always concerns by parents. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of the diseases we have been able to wipe out completely. Some of them is because of the parents who read about it, learn about it, and they've made the right decision that there's a purpose of vaccines. Our good health today is because of the introduction of vaccines. And my belief is, COVID-19 is a similar kind of a story. You just look at it, I think, worldwide, something like 2.5 million people or more have died. And in US alone, 760,000 people have died. And if you look at children, something like, I believe it's 600 or 700 children have died, and among them, anywhere from 100 to 150 in that 5 to 11-year-old children. So the consequences are just absolutely disastrous. And all the talk about infertility and all that, there's no evidence to suggest that there is any truth in that.
Gotcha. Thanks very much, Dr. Jeyaraj. So again, all good questions, and very reassuring that there are no reports like this in the data. So as a reminder, we do have a few minutes left for questions and answers. If you have anything you'd like to put into the chat box, we'll be sure to get that addressed with the panelists. I think it is worth commenting that, at the very beginning of this pandemic, there was some very, very preliminary information that was out there that said that children were not affected by this disease, right? In fact, there's a study that, a figure that came out that something like 3% of the cases were amongst children. But as things open up, as kids are back in school, as activities are resuming, right, we're actually seeing that infection rate becoming significantly higher amongst children, which are the largest now pool of unvaccinated individuals, right? So there's some data out there that the case count in the pediatric population is as high as 27%, rather than that 3% figure that was quoted at the very beginning of the pandemic when everything was locked down and we were not able to enjoy our regular ways of life, and our kids were not able to go to school and be amongst their friends and learn in an in-person setting in a safe manner, and so on. So a tremendous impact on the pediatric population, and I can't thank you all enough for taking time out of your day to come be a part of this session and to help get accurate science-based information out there amongst the concerned parents and individuals. So that being said, I don't see anything else currently in the Q&A session. I'd like to open it up for any final comments from any of our panelists that you'd like to bring up for the group.
Yeah, Dr. Wang, just to sort of piggyback on your comments about kids. So if you look at this Delta variant, the age group 5 to 11, sort of catapulted to near the top of the demographics in terms of who was getting COVID in this last surge. And clearly, I think that is a function of what populations are not vaccinated. Fortunately, what we've seen through that data is they are not dying from COVID, which is fantastic. I think they make up maybe less than 2% of all of the deaths from COVID in this last surge. And fortunately, they're not getting hospitalized like the adults are. But I do want to point out about the hospitalization part that if you break down the 5 to 11-year-olds who are hospitalized with COVID, these are kids of, these are children of color. These are African-American, Black, Native American children. So disproportionately, they affect, minorities in that setting. So it's really important. Now we have a really, a perfect storm of a challenge that we've been dealing with in the medical institution. How do we bring those people to the table to help them understand that they're at high risk, that the mortality rates seem to be higher, and at the same time challenge their thoughts and beliefs about a medical system that has not, done right by them. And I'm hoping that, when we look for common issues, it's that we want to protect these children. They need to go to school, interact with each other, have social relationships, and become, the members of society and live out their lifespans. As someone had mentioned, 90 to 100 years of a lifespan that we need to protect them for. So I think that's maybe some common ground when you hear about some of the hesitancy about parents to giving them the vaccine. Again, these conversations can happen, not only in the pediatrician's office, which is where we find most parents get their trusted information about medicine, but also in the communities, in the schools, in the school districts as well, as they, grapple to make decisions about their kids. I think one of the things that's been a real challenge most recently is what Governor Wolf mentioned, in the past few days about lifting the mask mandates in schools in January and leaving the decisions to continue mask mandates up to the school districts. We're going to see some very interesting information, I think, in the next 2 months with regards to pediatric vaccinations and masking in the middle of a respiratory viral season that should inform school districts about what the best thing is to do to keep kids in school, but also protect them from not only COVID, but things like flu, RSV, rhinovirus, and the like.
If I can just add on or comment on what Dr. Benjamin has said, there's also evidence that a lot of the children are positive for the COVID, but not necessarily be symptomatic. Now, the question is, what's the long-term consequences of that? We really do not know. See whether this will come up to haunt us, years from now. So there's again a case made for the vaccine to prevent these children from getting these diseases. The other point that I wanted to make is from Singapore. They have come out with some preliminary data that South Asians might have some genetic markers that makes them, more susceptible to get COVID and also more serious cases of COVID. Now, whether that can be corroborated by other studies, yet to be seen.
Dr. He, looks like you're on mute.
Sorry. So I just want to emphasize what Dr. Benjamin and Dr. Jeyaraj mentioned, and saying like, right now we already have like, it seems like numbers like more than 8,000 like COVID related hospitalization between the age group of like 5 to 11. And then, more than 5,000 kids actually suffered like the life-threatening like a COVID-related conditions like multi-system of inflammation syndromes, like there's inflammation in heart, lung, kidney, brain, and others, and we don't know the long-term impact on the kids and when they grow up, especially in the age group of 5 to 11. So actually, this group like account for 45, almost half of the cases. So so when we think about the, whether we should get the kid vaccinated or we will wait, or, a lot of the decisions, we really, have to think about, the impact of this, like a infection, and then the vaccine, like side effect, and then the normal life, and whether we want them to wear the mask for a longer time. I know this is really hard decision, and we really trying to collect more information. This is really so help like us to make a better decision for the kids and protect our kids. So thank you.
If I can just add one more comment. As of today, more than 360,000 vaccines have been given in the age group that we are talking about. So even though that 27% or 47%, we talked early on acceptance, it appears to me, within this short period of time that vaccine has been given to 5 to 11, the acceptance rate seems to be very high, 360,000 shots within a short time. I think it's remarkable.
This is really exciting.
All right, so lots of great points in this discussion. Certainly Dr. Benjamin's discussion about the equity issues that are raised by ensuring great access to vaccines in this population. Dr. Jeyaraj, with the uptake, again, great news that there is such a tremendous interest in getting the vaccine so early. Certainly something we've all been waiting for and all anxious to get so that our kids can be safe and be in school. And Dr. Heath, again, great points about the protections that are afforded by the vaccines. So as our session winds down to a close, I just wanted to say thanks again to this group of very distinguished panelists. Certainly, as a father to two young girls who are almost old enough to get vaccinated, I certainly feel much more reassured hearing about all this information. And you know, as a physician, of course I've been doing my following all the studies, and it's great to see so much data that is out there and so much safety and monitoring that has already occurred to get us to where we are today. And so thanks so much for breaking it down for us and making it understandable and really getting accurate information out there in a timely fashion. So with nothing else in the chat for right now, I'd like to turn it back to Mr. George Che for some final comments.
Well, on behalf of our community, I want to thank Dr. Wang for joining us, and especially Dr. Alvin Wang for moderating this great session, and distinguished panelists. And you have been great. I want to thank you. I do want to leave you with announcement about the upcoming clinics, and the Asian American Coalitions and Jason Medical Center are planning many vaccine clinics. But the three I want to mention, a new one is one thing I do mention what Dr. Alex Benjamin talked about, the equity issues. Even though this is Asian American Coalition, we're not limiting to the Asian American. In fact, been doing a lot of vaccinating for under communities. So we mentioned who have Latino workers, because we are working with them, and we're even asking business owner to drive Latino workers who may not have transportations. And so we are trying to reach the underserved communities. So because at the end, we all need to be vaccinated for the safety of a community. Three upcoming clinic is on November 19, Friday afternoon, Masjid Medina Islam Center in Upper Darby. It's mostly Bangladesh peoples and a local African American population there. And November 20, Saturday at Jason Center, Lansdale, 9 to 1 p.m. And the people can pre-register and come join us. And the November 22nd, Monday, the San Maria Goretti Parish, and there's it's a big parish, so the 3 to 6 p.m. we're expecting. So these are the only three upcoming ones, and I'm sure we're going to have to schedule many more. And up to this point, we've done about 45 clinics, and these are the labor-intensive communities that we got to go through because of their language and culture, and also religious sensitivities that we need to deal with. So we hope that you can have all the children's. These clinics will not be limited to children's, and we will be also providing a booster. So we will have all 3 vaccines available so that not only children we need to take care of, but also people who have not been vaccinated with the boosters. So we will be taking care of them. So join us. So let's not only vaccinate our kids, but our whole community. So again, thank you for joining us, and good night.